A flickering red light pulsed in Elias Voss's shattered helmet, a warning of imminent failure. His vision blurred in and out, the jagged remains of his ship drifting in the void around him like debris in a slow-motion explosion. Silence stretched across the expanse of space, broken only by the crackle of dying emergency signals. He was floating, weightless, lost, half a corpse in a graveyard of metal. A searing pain flared through his ribs as his body lurched against the restraints of his shattered cockpit. The heads-up display inside his helmet flared weakly, struggling to function through the damage. A monotone AI voice cut through the static. Oxygen reserves at 6%. Vital signs critical. Internal hemorrhaging detected. He gritted his teeth, tasting copper. Focus. Pain meant he was still alive. He forced himself upright, muscles screaming in protest, pushing through the fog of a near-lethal concussion. The last thing he remembered, the mission, the betrayal. He'd been abandoned. The shockwave of an energy torpedo had ruptured his ship's hull, sending him careening into the null zone. They hadn't bothered confirming the kill. They thought the null zone would do it for them. But Elias Voss wasn't dead. Not yet. He drifted toward the wreckage of his once proud vessel. It splintered, hull reflecting the eerie glow of distant stars. But his wasn't the only ruin here. The null zone was a cosmic tomb, littered with broken warships and forgotten relics from battles long past. Crippled cruisers, derelict carriers, some human, most alien, all swallowed by the void. Above him, the battle still raged. Two alien fleets clashed in the darkness, streaks of plasma fire illuminating the abyss. Fighters twisted and dove, their engines leaving ghostly trails of blue light in the blackness of space. The combatants paid no attention to the broken wreckage below, no attention to him. Elias's helmet HUD glitched, flashing a new warning. Structural integrity compromised. Helmet seal failure imminent. A hairline crack spiderwebbed across his visor. He exhaled sharply. No backup, no distress beacon, no comms. The only thing standing between him and the vacuum was a failing suit and sheer willpower. I'm not dying here. He reached out, his gloved hand gripping the twisted metal frame of his ruined cockpit. He dragged himself forward, breath labored, every movement a fresh surge of agony. Adrenaline kept him moving. Determination kept him alive. Below him, the planet's surface loomed, a wasteland of jagged rock and violent storms, churning with electrical fire. No sane being set foot in the null zone and lived to tell the tale. Then again, Elias had never been known for playing it safe. He activated his suit thrusters in a single desperate burst, hurling himself toward the planet below. The force of his landing sent Elias rolling down a slope of loose rock and dust. His damaged thrusters had barely slowed the descent, and he hit the ground hard, the impact rattling his already broken ribs. Pain lanced through his body. He didn't have time to acknowledge it. The null zone's surface was a nightmare. Skies, burned crimson, heavy with ash and acidic rain. Towering monoliths of blackened stone jutted from the ground like the skeletal remains of some forgotten civilization. Wind howled through the canyons, carrying the ghostly echoes of a past no one remembered. His helmet HUD flickered, struggling to scan the terrain. Atmosphere, toxic. Oxygen depletion in 11 minutes. Recommended action, immediate shelter required. Elias gritted his teeth. Yeah. No shit. His hands moved on instinct, checking his inventory. Oxygen tank nearly depleted. Comms module, fried. Distress beacon, non-existent. Weapons, none. He was running on empty. And if he didn't find a way to breathe, he'd suffocate before anything else had the chance to kill him. Movement flickered in his peripheral vision. Elias froze. At first he thought it was just the wind kicking up debris. Then he saw them. Shadows low to the ground slithering between the wreckage. Watching. Waiting. His gut tightened. Predators. His fingers found the twisted remains of a ship's hull, sharp and jagged. A weapon. Crude, but better than nothing. Elias shifted his stance, rolling his shoulders despite the pain. If they thought he was easy prey, they were about to learn a lesson the hard way. A low, guttural hiss echoed through the ruins. The first creature lunged. Elias sidestepped, swinging his makeshift blade in a brutal arc. Metal met flesh, and the creature screeched. A nightmarish blend of reptilian and insectoid, its body armored in chitinous plating. A second one came from behind. Elias dropped, rolling beneath the swipe of razor-sharp claws, narrowly avoiding evisceration. He came up fast, driving the jagged metal straight into the beast's exposed throat. Warm, alien blood splattered against his cracked visor. The creature spasmed, then collapsed. The others hesitated. Good. Let them hesitate. Elias was already scanning the environment. Every battle was a puzzle. Every enemy had a weakness. The creatures relied on numbers. Pack hunters. They didn't expect resistance. Elias bared his teeth in something that wasn't quite a smile. Come, on then. The remaining beasts circled, chittering, trying to calculate whether this lone, wounded human was worth the trouble. Elias took a slow step forward. Then another. The creatures backed away. In the end, they were predators, not warriors. They sought easy prey. And Elias Voss, he was anything but. The creatures retreated, vanishing back into the ruins. Elias exhaled, his grip tightening around his makeshift blade. He wasn't out of the fire yet, but he'd survived round one. Now came the hard part. He turned his gaze skyward, past the roiling storm clouds. Somewhere up there, the bastards who left him for dead still believed he was gone. They were wrong. He was alive. He was coming. And the whole damn galaxy was about to find out what happens when you try to kill a human. And fail. Elias staggered through the wreckage, his body screaming in protest with every step. His cracked visor flickered, weakly, dimly illuminating the skeletal remains of a ruined starship. The twisted hull stretched out before him, a gaping wound in the wasteland. Its metal ribs torn open as if some ancient beast had been gutted and left to rot. A Cathari raider ship. It had been here for years, long enough to be stripped bare by scavengers, yet still intact enough to offer him a chance at shelter. The wind howled across the desolate terrain, a living thing shrieking through the ruins, clawing at his exposed wounds. The air was thick with the scent of ionized metal and something deeper, something older. The smell of death baked into the planet itself. He stumbled forward, collapsing against a cold, rusted bulkhead. His breath came in shallow, ragged gulps, his ribs grinding together like shattered glass. You're dead, Voss. The whisper crept through the back of his mind, wrapping around his thoughts like an old wound reopening. You don't exist anymore. A growl built in his throat as he shoved the thought aside. Not dead. Not yet. His fingers worked through the debris, scanning for anything useful. A half-functional energy blade, its power cell flickering weakly but still capable of slicing through flesh. A ration pack, expired but edible. A thermal blanket, barely intact but enough to keep him from freezing to death. It wasn't much, but it was enough. Outside, the storm raged, slamming against the ship's remains like a beast demanding entry. The wind carried dust, static, and the ghosts of forgotten battles. Elias sat back, chewing the stale ration, forcing himself to swallow. They thought he was gone. Erased. Buried. They were wrong. The universe had already tried to kill him. It had failed. Tomorrow he would start hunting for a way out. Tonight, he would rest. Elias moved at dawn, or at least what passed for dawn in this cursed place. The sky remained a bruised purple, streaked with violent flashes of distant lightning. The storm clouds never fully parted. There was no true morning here, only an endless cycle of twilight and shadow. He trudged forward, his legs heavy, his mind sharp. Survival had become a rhythm. Keep moving, keep breathing, stay ahead of death. Then he saw it. A structure loomed on the horizon, half buried in the shifting sands of time. Elias halted, breath catching in his throat. It wasn't a ship. It wasn't wreckage. It was something older, The architecture was unlike anything he had ever seen. The walls pulsed faintly, humming with a resonance that tickled the edge of his perception. Unreadable glyphs ran along its surface, etched in patterns that seemed to shift when he wasn't looking. The material was smooth, untouched by decay, untouched by time. He had seen ruins before. Derelict stations, ancient battlefields, abandoned. Temples left to rot in the cold expanse of space. But this was different. His steps echoed as he entered. His suit's built-in translator failed instantly, the symbols too alien, too vast for its programming. A soft hum rose around him. A console flickered to life at his approach. He hesitated. No distress beacon, no comms, no ship. But knowledge was power. And if this place held anything at all, that could help him survive, he would take it. Slowly he reached out, brushing his gloved fingers against the console. The glyphs shifted, rearranging, adapting. A message appeared. Warning. The one who cheats death will be hunted by the void. Elias exhaled sharply, eyes narrowing. A warning or a prophecy? He didn't believe in curses. But the relic before him? That was real. Suspended in the air, floating without support, was a shard of black metal. Sleek, pulsing, humming with energy older than any empire. His instincts screamed at him to leave it alone. He reached for it anyway. The moment his fingers closed around the relic, the vault shuddered. The walls reacted to him. Something inside the structure awakened. A pulse of information surged through his mind, fractured images, scattered data, echoes of something lost, and then a whisper. You are not the first. Then silence. Elias pocketed the relic. Curses be damned. The Cathari raiders weren't supposed to be here. Even among the most ruthless mercenaries, slavers, and warlords, there were places even they avoided. The Null Zone wasn't just dangerous. It was cursed. A black mark on the star maps, filled with the wreckage of civilizations that had wandered in and never returned. It was a graveyard. No one lived here. And yet, someone had activated something ancient, and now the Cathari had come to investigate. Their ship, a brutal spiked war cruiser, hovered above the ruins of dead ships and lost cities. It wasn't built for stealth or subtlety. It was a predator, designed to strike fear into those who saw it. Inside the command deck, the air was thick, with the hum of control panels, the glow of alien glyphs flickering across tactical screens. A dull red emergency light pulsed overhead, bathing everything in a bloodied hue. The commander sat rigidly in his throne, his black-scaled fingers tapping rhythmically against the armrest. His yellow, slitted eyes flicked across the flickering data screens. A sharp click of mandibles echoed through the silence. This is a waste of time, one of his crew hissed. His spine tail flicked with agitation, claws tapping against the controls. There's nothing here but dust and ghosts. The commander's gaze never wavered. His voice was low, almost amused. There was a disturbance. His forked tongue flicked out, testing the air. Something activated, something old. A murmur passed through the bridge. He motioned to the holographic display in front of them. The shifting radar feed pulsed with faint readings, nothing more than a whisper of a life sign. A lone survivor. The crew stiffened. Impossible, one of them muttered. No one survives in the Null Zone. The commander finally turned his cold, predatory gaze toward them. Then tell me, he said, voice dark with curiosity, why are there whispers of a ghost in the Null Zone? A tense silence followed. The Cathari did not fear the dead, but they feared what refused to die. Elias watched from the ruins, his breath slow and controlled, every muscle coiled in readiness. The Cathari warship had landed, a towering, jagged vessel that looked as much a predator as its crew. The boarding ramp lowered with a hiss of pressurized air, and a dozen mercenaries poured out, weapons raised, movements sharp and practiced. They expected resistance. They expected an ambush. They didn't expect him. Elias moved in silence, his form blending into the skeletal remains of the wreckage. Every shadow, every twisted beam of metal, every half-buried corridor was a weapon, an extension of his survival, stealth, misdirection, patience. He was one man. That was enough. The first Cathari barely had time to scream before Elias's blade slid across his throat, severing his voice before it could carry. He dropped silent, dark blood pooling in the dust. The second mercenary turned, instinctively raising his rifle. Too late. Elias was already gone. A blur. A ghost. The shot went wild, sparks exploding against the rusted hull of a fallen ship. Panic spread like a virus. "There's something out there," one of them hissed, tail lashing. The commander sneered, baring his fangs. "It's just a survivor. Kill him." Elias smiled. Let them try. Another fell, his body yanked into the darkness. A gurgled choke, a flash of silver, gone. A third turned, clawing for his communicator. A hand clamped over his mouth, a blade slipping. Into his ribs, then chaos. The Cathari fired wildly, their discipline unraveling. Muzzle flashes lit up the ruins, their weapons cutting into the darkness. But there was nothing to shoot at. Their fear had already won. By the time Elias reached the ship, half of them were dead. The commander turned, eyes wide, pulse rifle rising, but he was too slow. Elias activated the stolen energy blade, its blue glow flashing like lightning. The weapon hummed as he drove it deep into the commander's gut. The Cathari gasped, choking, the light already fading from his yellow eyes. The ship was his now. Elias stepped over the body, moving to the cockpit. As he took the controls, his gaze flickered to the last surviving mercenaries still scrambling through the ruins. He let them live, not out of mercy, because they would run. And when they did, they would tell the galaxy what had happened here. They would tell them about the human who refused to die. As the ship roared into the storm-filled sky, Elias set a course toward the unknown. His legend had already begun. It began as whispers. At first it was nothing more than background noise. Tales spun in dimly lit cantinas and muttered between nervous pilots. A rumor from the edges of known space, buried beneath the chaos of galactic war. But whispers have a way of becoming something more. The first transmission came from a struggling freighter in the outer colonies, buried within a standard distress call. A miner ship had barely escaped a Cathari raid, the crew shaken, muttering about a shadow in the dark. A ghost, they said, a figure moving through the battlefield, cutting down mercenaries with impossible precision. Then, another report. A Cathari warlord intercepted a coded transmission from his own surviving mercenaries. Their voices were broken, frantic with terror. "The human who refused to die walks among us." It should have been dismissed as nonsense, a fabrication, a trick of war. But then the stories started multiplying. A lone survivor, emerging from the wreckage of the Null Zone, a place no one left alive. A warrior who could not be killed, a spirit of vengeance, tearing through entire mercenary squads like a storm of death. By the time the rumors reached the fringe worlds, it was already legend. A merchant ship traveling through the Null Zone reported seeing a single battered starfighter leaving the wreckage of a Cathari warship. The ship had no markings, no call sign, just a streak of motion before it vanished into deep space. The merchant crew never got a clear visual of the pilot. But it didn't matter. By the time the rumors reached the galactic core, Elias Voss had become something more than a man. Some called him a ghost, a phantom of war unbound by death. Others claimed he was the first of a new breed of human, one who could defy the void itself. And the most dangerous stories? They said he wasn't human at all. The truth didn't matter anymore. The myth had already taken on a life of its own. Dr. Cynthia Arvex watched the reports with growing unease. Her entire career had been built on tracking the rise and fall of myths, untangling fabricated legends from historical truths. Galactic history was littered with false heroes, exaggerated warriors, and whispers of immortals. But this was different. The myths surrounding Elias Voss weren't just stories whispered in back alleys. They were spreading too fast, too persistently. They carried weight. Even the most cynical factions had begun to take notice. In the halls of the Galactic Core, the Coalition's ruling chambers echoed with heated debate. "This is fringe hysteria," the High Chancellor scoffed, waving a dismissive hand at the reports. But others weren't so sure. A holographic display flickered to life, showing a grainy transmission from a distant outpost world. A massacre. Bodies left where they fell. Blood smeared on durasteel walls. One of the officials leaned forward, eyes narrowing at the footage. "Have you ever known the Cathari to fear ghosts?" Silence. And then, there was Commander Jathar. The Terek war chief had survived 1,000 battlefields, carving his empire from the corpses of lesser warlords. He had seen empires crumble, not always because of fleets or firepower, but because of symbols. And this Elias Voss? He was becoming the deadliest symbol of all. Jathar's advisors urged caution. "The null zone is a graveyard," one of them warned, "a place even our ancestors feared." But Jathar only saw opportunity. His heavy hand rested on the war table, tracing the reports, eyes gleaming with something between calculation and hunger. "If he is real," Jathar murmured, voice deep and steady, "then he is a weapon waiting to be wielded. And if he wasn't real, then it was time to turn myth into reality." The hunt for Elias Voss had begun. The first uprising began on Helion Prime, a world suffocating under the grip of the Orion Syndicate. For years, its people had known only servitude, their labor fueling, a war machine they would never benefit from. Their crops, their minerals, their manufactured weapons, all stolen, all fed into the endless hunger of the Syndicate's expansion. The enforcers ruled with brutality, ensuring that fear remained absolute. The people didn't rebel because they knew what happened to those who did. Fear kept them in chains. But fear is a fragile thing. And one night, a crack formed in the foundation of oppression. A single phrase appeared on the walls of the governor's palace. Bold, defiant, unstoppable. Elias Voss lives. It was erased by morning. By midday it was back. By nightfall it had spread. The message moved like a phantom, appearing on supply crates, factory walls, and stolen broadcasts. It was whispered in the darkened corridors of the mines, passed between workers in gritted whispers, a mantra, a prayer, a promise, and then a riot. A syndicate officer struck a worker too hard. A rifle fired, someone screamed, someone fought back. And suddenly, fear was gone. The people of Helion Prime rose up. At first it was just chaos, workers hurling tools, syndicate patrols opening fire. The enforcers expected them to scatter. They didn't. They fought. And then, the unthinkable happened. They won. The Orion Syndicate's forces crumbled. Their carefully maintained rule of terror shattered in an instant, because this wasn't just one rebellion on one forgotten world. This was the first spark of a galaxy-wide fire. It wasn't just Helion Prime. It was Dakar 7th, where miners seized control of their refineries. It was Tau Ceti 4, where shipbuilders turned their own creations into war machines. It was Kandar's Reach, where syndicate patrols vanished into the sand, never to be seen again. It was every world that had been crushed under the boot of oppression, and, at the heart of it, one name: Elias Voss. The Coalition labeled him a terrorist. The warlords saw him as an opportunity. The mercenary guilds placed the highest bounty in history on his head. But the people? They didn't see a war criminal. They saw a symbol. They saw hope. And hope is the deadliest weapon of all. Elias watched from the shadows. He had not started this war, but war had found him anyway. The rebellion no longer needed him. Because he was no longer just a man. He was a myth. The next time Elias surfaced, it was during a skirmish on the ice world of Varek 9. The battle had already begun when he arrived, rebel forces pinned down by Dominion enforcers. Elias had no stake in the fight. No reason to intervene, but then he saw them, The rebels, malnourished, outgunned, desperate, fighting because they had no other choice, and he saw their leader, a young woman clutching a scavenged rifle, her expression hollow but determined. She was going to die. So Elias made a choice. He stepped onto the battlefield. The first enforcer didn't even see him coming. Elias moved like a ghost, slipping between the enemy ranks, hijacking their weapons and turning them against them. A plasma grenade detonated, but he was already gone. By the time the Dominion realized what was happening, their entire formation had collapsed. The battle was over in minutes. The rebels stared in stunned silence. And then one of them whispered his name. Elias Voss. The woman stepped forward, her breath visible in the cold air. "You're real," she murmured. "You're really him." Elias didn't know what to say. He wasn't a leader. He wasn't a hero. But he looked at the rebels. These people, who had clung to his name like it was the last light in the dark. He couldn't walk away. So he gave them the only thing he could. "Get your wounded out of here," he said. "You've got 3 hours before reinforcements arrive." The woman hesitated. "Will you?" But Elias was already gone. As he disappeared into the frozen wastes, he heard the rebels chanting his name. His victories were stacking. But with every battle, every uprising, he felt something slipping away. The more they chanted his name, the less he felt like himself. Was this what it meant to become a legend? Was this what it meant to stop being a man? And worse, could he ever stop? The Imperial Council had tolerated the myth of Elias Voss for long enough. The whispers had turned into a roar, and that roar had begun shaking the very foundations of their dominion. The Coalition's outer colonies were in revolt. The Dominion's AI enclaves were questioning their programming. The warlords of the Galactic Fringe were breaking away, refusing to pay tribute. One name was on every rebel's lips. One ghost haunted the Empire's every move: Elias Voss. "Enough," the High Chancellor spat, watching the latest footage of a shattered Dominion stronghold, its soldiers routed by insurgents chanting the human's name. "This has gone beyond containment." Across the dimly lit circular chamber, the other counselors sat in silence, their holographic screens pulsing with encrypted data. They knew what had to be done. One of them spoke, voice mechanical, devoid of emotion. "Deploy Varos Prime." A ripple of unease passed through the room. Varos was not a soldier, not a fleet. Varos was an executioner, a living weapon of the Dominion, half machine, half nightmare. "He is not a man," the Chancellor said. "He does not fail." For a long moment no one spoke. Then, one by one, the counselors nodded. Orders were issued. In the depths of a black site lab, a cybernetic monster awoke. The hunt had begun. Elias knew they would come. He had spent months vanishing, leaving only fragments of his legend behind. But now, as he stood in the ruins of an abandoned colony world, staring at the approaching warship, he knew he couldn't run any longer. The air shimmered as Varos Prime descended from the ship, his massive frame landing in the dust with an impact that sent shockwaves through the dead city. Tall, 8 feet of reinforced cybernetic armor, a fusion of organic matter and machine, its face hidden beneath a visor of shifting red lights. A voice, hollow and mechanical. Elias Voss. Elias cracked his neck, gripping the stolen Cathari energy blade he had scavenged weeks ago. "Been waiting for you." The moment stretched. Then they moved. Varos struck first, a blur of steel and plasma, a force of nature designed to kill. Elias barely dodged, rolling beneath the first strike. The ground where he had stood exploded into molten debris. Elias countered, his blade slicing through air, cutting against armor, but not deep enough. Varos grabbed him by the throat, lifting him effortlessly. "Your legend is an error," the executioner droned. "I am here to correct it." Elias spat blood, then drove a knife straight into Varos's exposed cybernetic joint. The machine shuddered, not in pain, but in surprise. Elias wrenched free, landing in a crouch. The fight raged through the ruins, an unstoppable force against an immovable will. For every time Elias dodged, Varos countered. For every strike Elias landed, Varos adapted. It was only a matter of time. And then, the final blow. Varos's blade sliced through Elias's ribs, straight into his lung. Elias staggered. Blood spilled onto the dust. For the first time in a long, long time, he felt something unfamiliar. Cold Varos loomed over him. "Your death is necessary." Elias looked up, smiled through the blood. Not today. The detonator was already in his hand. Elias's breath came in ragged gasps, his body screaming in protest, his vision swimming with pain. His ribs were cracked, his strength failing. He couldn't win this fight, not like this. But he didn't need to win. He just needed them to think he lost. The pulse grenade was primed, not for destruction, but deception. A trick. A lie. A ghost's last breath. Varos Prime stood before him, his monstrous cybernetic form outlined in the burning ruins. His red visor gleamed like a demon's eye, scanning Elias's every move. "You cannot escape," Varos droned. His voice was a hollow void of certainty. "You are already dead." Elias pressed the detonator. The world erupted into chaos. A blinding flash of light tore through the ruins, engulfing everything in a wave of smoke and fire. Energy pulses ripped through the air, sending debris flying, shattering what little remained of the battlefield. Varos reeled backward, his armor cracking under the concussive force. His scanners flickered. Errors. Distortions. No target detected. When the smoke finally cleared, Elias was gone. No body, no trace, just ruins and silence. Varos remained motionless, his cybernetic systems running rapid recalibrations. No life signs detected, no movement, no sound. For exactly 4 seconds, the executioner stood in absolute stillness. Then, he activated his communicator, his voice cold, emotionless. Target eliminated. And just like that, Elias Voss was declared dead. On the inner worlds, celebrations erupted. The Galactic Council paraded their victory, their leaders standing before their people, promising that the rebellion had lost its head. The Dominion resumed its expansion, their AI enforcers wiping away the last remnants of resistance. The bounty on Elias's head vanished overnight. His enemies believed themselves victorious. His allies mourned him. The rebellion staggered, wounded, but not broken. His name was whispered in mourning, in disbelief, in refusal to accept reality. But something unexpected happened. The myth didn't die. It grew. "They say he died," the whispers began, "but no one ever found a body. They say he let the Empire think they won." Elias watched from the shadows. The soft hum of the stolen Dominion vessel pulsed around him, its cold, sterile walls bathed in the flickering glow of intercepted transmissions. His body ached, his wounds still raw beneath the hastily patched armor. He had been on the edge of death too many times to count. But he was alive, and the galaxy was falling apart without him. The warlords, the rebels, the outlaws, they had taken his name and turned it into something unstoppable. They had built a revolution around a man who no longer existed. Elias leaned against the console, his fingers tightening around the cold metal. The screen in front of him flickered, showing a dozen variations of his face across intercepted broadcasts, wanted posters, bounties placed by the highest authorities, memorials built in his honor. Elias Voss, the fallen hero, the martyr, the legend. But there was one thing none of them knew. He was still here, very, very much alive. He exhaled slowly, his breath fogging against the chilled air. His gaze drifted past the screen, out into the infinite abyss of stars. The Empire thought they had won. They had no idea what they had unleashed. Because Elias Voss wasn't just a man anymore. He was an idea, and ideas don't die. The galaxy teetered, on the edge of collapse. War brewing in every sector, rebellions rising in the farthest colonies, empires shifting under the weight of uncertainty. And Elias? He would be there to watch it burn. The galaxy refused to forget his name. It started in the war-torn streets of Helion Prime, where the fires of rebellion still smoldered. Resistance fighters painted his sigil on shattered walls, a simple yet powerful mark, a lone star bisected by a blade. It was a promise, a declaration, a warning. His name spread like a plague, infecting every corner of the galaxy. In the lawless outer worlds, where pirates and smugglers held dominion, they whispered of him in darkened cantinas. They claimed to have seen him, moving through the void, walking among ghosts. Some swore they had heard his voice crackle through old comm frequencies, issuing coded messages to the lost and desperate. In the Dominion archives, where AI constructs feared nothing, his name became an anomaly. Every time the system tried to purge him, his legend rewrote itself, a name that should not exist yet refused to be erased. The Imperial Council, in desperation, declared his myth illegal. They forbade the mention of his name. They erased his records from history. But fear is fuel for rebellion, and what was once a whisper became a war cry. Voss lives. On Dakar 7, an enslaved mining colony, an uprising began with those two words scratched onto a supply crate. By the time the guards saw it, the entire colony had risen in defiance. The warlords of the Galactic Fringe, once sworn rivals, now hesitated before attacking the insurgents. Some claimed they had fought beside Elias in the shadows. Others swore they had seen him piloting a stolen warship, appearing where he was needed most, only to vanish before anyone could confirm his presence. Even among the Cathari mercenaries, his old enemies, stories spread. The ghost of the Null Zone had become something else. Elias Voss wasn't just a man anymore. He was a legend that no empire could kill. Elias Voss sat in the dim glow of the starship's cockpit, staring out into the vast, endless stretch of star-streaked darkness. Outside, the universe burned. Revolutions rose and fell. Empires tightened their grip or crumbled beneath rebellion. And through it all, his name echoed across the void, whispered in secret meetings, chanted in battle, painted on the walls of ruined cities. But he wasn't there. Not for them. Not anymore. He exhaled, his breath fogging against the chilled air. Slowly, he ran a hand over his face, his fingers brushing over the deep scars etched into his skin, the only proof he was still real. Was he? Was he still a man? Or had he become nothing more than an idea, a story the galaxy refused to let die? He had spent his entire life fighting wars that weren't his. He had survived when he should have died. He had outlived his enemies, his allies, even his own death. And yet, here he was, alone. The rebels chanted his name, but they weren't fighting for him. They were fighting for what he had come to represent. A symbol, a ghost, a lie. He wasn't their savior. He never had been. He was just a man who refused to die. And maybe that was enough. The message came in the dead silence of deep space, a single, pulsing signal, so faint, so ancient that Elias almost dismissed it as background radiation. But something about it felt wrong, or right. His instincts, honed by a lifetime of war and survival, sent a chill down his spine. This was no ordinary transmission. Frowning, he activated the ship's decoding array, feeding the signal into the onboard processors. The machine struggled. The encryption was not of this age, not from the Dominion, the Coalition, or the Warlords. It was older. And then, through the distorted static, a voice spoke. Elias Voss. His breath caught. The signal wasn't just noise. It knew his name. He sat up straighter, fingers tightening on the console as more text flickered onto the screen, the ship's translation software choking on symbols that predated any known civilization. Then a single phrase emerged from the distortion. You were never meant to survive. And yet here you are. Elias leaned back in his chair, heart pounding as he stared at the words. This wasn't a message from his enemies. It wasn't from the rebellion, or the syndicates, or the hidden warlords of the Fringe. This was something else. Something older, something that had been watching. He exhaled slowly, his fingers curling into a fist. For the first time in a long, long time, Elias Voss felt something almost like fear, or maybe, just maybe, a new beginning. The vault felt alive. Elias stepped forward, his boots echoing against a surface that defied definition. Metal that wasn't quite metal, stone that wasn't quite stone. The walls shimmered, shifting with a light that wasn't illumination, but something deeper, something woven into the very fabric of the place. Glyphs pulsed in waves, shifting in and out of forms his mind struggled to process. He had seen ruins before, old war zones, derelict stations, forgotten battlefields left to the cold of space. But this was different. This place wasn't abandoned. It was waiting. The air itself hummed, charged with an energy older than the oldest civilizations. Elias reached the center of the chamber where a pedestal stood unmarked, untouched by time. As if sensing his presence, a holographic interface flickered to life. A voice whispered through the vast emptiness, neither human nor machine. "You were never meant to survive. Yet here you are." Elias froze. The words weren't pre-recorded. They weren't random data. They were directed at him. The glyphs on the walls shifted, rearranging themselves in real time. Not just data, they were watching him. His jaw tightened. "Who are you?" Silence. Then, a phrase appeared written in symbols. He shouldn't be able to read, yet somehow understood. The last of the first ones. The ones who came before. And beneath it, a second message. "You walk a path not meant for mortals." The vault had recognized him, as if it had been waiting for him all along. Elias felt it then, a weight pressing down on him, heavy and vast, stretching beyond his own understanding. It wasn't fear. It wasn't even awe. It was realization. For years, he had defied fate. He had survived where he shouldn't have, escaped where others had perished, built a legend that refused to die. He had always told himself it was luck. It wasn't. Standing in this ancient place, surrounded by the whispers of a forgotten era, he understood it had never been an accident. Something had guided him here. Something had been watching. And now, it was time to reveal itself. The vault shifted, not with mechanical movement, but with a fluid, unnatural grace, as if the walls themselves had been waiting to step aside. Beyond them, a star map appeared, stretching across dimensions Elias couldn't fully grasp, not of his galaxy, of something beyond it. Elias clenched his fists. This wasn't about a war. It wasn't about a rebellion. It wasn't about the empire that wanted him dead. This was bigger, older. Whatever had built this place was still out there. And if they knew his name, then maybe they knew why he had survived when no one else did. For the first time in his life, Elias wasn't running toward war. He was chasing the truth. And this time he wasn't sure if he'd like what he found.